Hi, hello, how are you all? Welcome to my channel Law Made Simple with me Vidya Reddy. Today in this video, let us learn about the golden rule of interpretation. Earlier in the previous video, we have learned about the grammatical and literal rule. Now today, let us learn about the golden rule of interpretation. According to this rule, the words must be given their ordinary, natural and popular meaning. However, such natural meaning of the words may lead to hardships, inconvenience or injustice. In such cases, courts can modify the meaning of the word and interpret the statutes. This is a modification of the literal rule. So, in the literal and grammatical rule, if there is any inconvenience or any hardships or if you find any injustice, the courts will interpret and take into the consideration of the golden rule. Let us come to the meaning of the golden rule. The golden rule is a modification of the principle of literal interpretation of statute. This is also known as modifying method of interpretation. So, modification to the literal rule is nothing but a golden rule. According to Parker, the language of a statute may be varied or modified to avoid absurdity or repugnance, where grammatical construction leads to such absurdity or anomaly. The golden rule is applicable when the words given more than one meaning and alternative constructions are possible. When the literal interpretation leads to absurdity, repugnance, inconvenience, hardships, injustice or evasion, the courts may departure from the literal construction. This rule solves all problems and is known as Golden Rule. This Golden Rule was coined down by Lord Winslow in Gray versus Pearson's case. Coming to the application of the rule, as we have already studied in the meaning itself, when there is an absurdity, inconvenience or hardships in the literal and grammatical rule, the golden rule comes into picture. So, the application of the rule is only permissible to the extent it avoids absurdity, anomaly and inconvenience. When the consequences of an interpretation is manifest injustice, the court will generally hesitate to give effect to it. Similarly, a construction leading to absurdity will be rejected. The duty of the court is to suppress all evasions. The golden rule suggests that the consequences or effects of an interpretation deserve a lot of importance. This rule is to be applied having regard to the consequences. In any statute, if the words are ambiguous, that interpretation is to be preferred which prefers the law from being absurd or dead. The duty of the courts is to consider the object of the act and needs of the society. So, the statutes are made by the legislature to make it into use by the courts. If the statutes are finding it absurd or there is inconvenience in application, the courts will try to apply other rules such as golden rules. For example, when a person normally goes to office by a particular road and one day when there is a traffic problem, he may take a deviation and reach his office. Here deviation is required because the normal way has not allowed him to make to his office. In the similar manner, if there is any inconvenience in the literal or grammatical interpretation, that rule is avoided and the golden rule is applied. Similar way, the courts take such decisions as the case of the person who has deviated the other route to make to his office. Coming to the judicial approach, the Supreme Court of India in Velluswamy versus Raja Nair has observed that on its true construction, a statute leads to anomalous results. The courts have no option but to give the effect to it and leave it to the legislature to amend and alter the law. But when on a construction of the statute two views are possible, one will result in anomaly and other not. It is our duty to adopt the latter and not the former. So, as clear as the meaning itself in the golden rule, we have studied that if there is an absurdity, inconvenience or it is creating any injustice, the one which is giving the construction which is giving inconvenience should be denied and the one which is giving a good approach should be considered. So, in one of the cases of M. Pentaya versus Veeramallappa also, these are the appellants, the respondents were the members of Municipal Committee under the Hyderabad Municipal and Town Committees Act 1951. That act was repealed in 1956, but there was no elections until then. So they said that let us continue in the same office because there is no elections held. But under the Act of 1951, maximum period for a committee to hold office is only 3 years, and the same act and the same rule will continue in 1956 also. The appellant prayed for qua warranto. The Supreme Court said that if there are two views, then the act will continue with the same rule as of 1951 only. Like it said in 1951 also, the committee have only 3 years, and as such the members will also have. The court said that the members of the committee automatically cease to be the members after the expiry of 3 years. Coming to the advantages and disadvantages of the golden rule. So, like every rule, we have advantages and disadvantages. Let us come into the advantages of the golden rule. With the help of golden rule, errors in drafting can be corrected immediately. We have seen decisions are made more in line with Parliament intentions. It helps to give a rational result. It helps in closing any loophole. It brings common sense to the law. It allows the court to make sensible decisions. It prevents Parliament from having to pass amending legislation. It respects the authority of the Parliament because it only allows wandering to be altered in very limited situations where the outcome would be absurd or repugnant. So, right from the meaning of the golden rule till its application, we have studied all the advantages. Like when there is any absurdity or repugnance in application of the literal and grammatical rule, the golden rule will come into existence. And the main aim of the Parliament to pass a statute is to implement it. So the very basics, the very intention of the Parliament comes into consideration, and it gives a very good result, and it covers the loopholes of the statutes, and it makes sense to the law, and it avoids amending the legislation very soon. So these are the advantages of the golden rule. Coming to the disadvantages of the golden rule, it infringes the separation of powers. Judges have no power to intervene for pure justice where there is no absurdity. Judges cannot add or modify a statute. It allows judges to change the wordings of statutes in very limited circumstances. Michael Zander describes it as a feeble parachute because it is not much in use. It is unpredictable and lacks guidelines. Of course, the golden rule has no much guidelines. It only comes into the picture when there is absurdity in the primary rule, that is literal and grammatical rule. So here I have given the distinction between grammatical and golden interpretation rules. So we have grammatical interpretation and golden interpretation. The grammatical interpretation is also called as literal interpretation, while the golden interpretation is also called as functional interpretation. Grammatical interpretation depends upon the letter of enacted law, that is litera legis. And the golden interpretation depends upon the spirit of the enacted law. It is a legislative intent. It only gives the intention of the legislature. Coming to the grammatical interpretation, it interprets only the verbal expression of the statute. It doesn't go beyond or deep into the meaning of the statute. So it is the plain meaning, and it gives the intention of the legislature. And what about this golden interpretation? It looks beyond the litera legis. It seeks elsewhere from some other and more satisfactory evidence to find out the truth. Like in the meaning we have studied, like if there is any absurdity in the interpretation, the golden rule will seek some more satisfactory evidence. In grammatical interpretation, the words constructed according to the popular or dictionary meaning of the term. So it gives the plain meaning. While the when the grammatical interpretation fails, this golden interpretation comes into picture, and to find out the sententia legis, that is the legislative intention from the other sources, the external and internal aids of the statute. So grammatical interpretation is used very frequently, and golden interpretation is used rarely. Grammatical interpretation is the traditional one, while the golden interpretation is developed only after the failure or when there is absurdity in the grammatical interpretation. So, grammatical interpretation is the old rule, while golden interpretation is propounded by Lord Wensley in the case of Gray versus Pearson. As such, we have come to the end of the video. It's riddle time. Please answer the riddle in the comment section. Please like, share and subscribe my channel for many more interesting topics. Thank you.